Cool. Well, I'm sorry about that, everyone. And thank you for joining to my live stream. I was saying before that this is only the second live stream I'm doing, so bear with me while I get used to it, but hope to do more. So yeah, I'll kick us off by saying thank you so much. And we reached 10K. So yes, this is a big achievement for me. I never thought that I would be where I am now. When I kind of started off on stuff, I wasn't really sure where things would go. And while this is still a very small platform, I'm really looking forward to 2025 and seeing what that brings us. And I look tired. Oh yeah, well, I've just had a whole day at work, so go easy on me. Okay, so I put a post in my community channel for questions and have quite a bit of questions there. Some more questions via email, but please post questions in the chat and let me know. I will keep an eye on those as well. Pablo says, congrats on 100K. Try 10% of that. It's 10K, but I appreciate the confidence you have in me. So, all right. So I'm gonna start with actually a question from Michael. So shout out to Michael because he is a big supporter, been there since nearly the beginning. And Michael says, congratulations, dear Jack. My request would be, number one, more information about UK politics. Okay, so I'll address that first. Yeah, it's a tricky thing really with this because I actually have a higher viewer percentage from the States than the UK. And first of all, it's difficult when you're not in the US to even break the US in terms of viewership. So I think that's a good thing. And the market is so much bigger. So I have a bigger chance of growing. But on the other hand, I'm more interested in UK politics because I'm here and because our government is so terrible with everything going on with Labour. And, you know, sometimes I'm unsure of which to talk about more because while the UK is really interested in US politics are not as interested in the UK. I mean, Elon Musk likes to chime in every once in a while, which I really appreciate for calling out our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, for all of his shit. So yes, I would like to talk about it more. I think it would be good for me to know if you're not in the UK, do you find any of this, do you find any UK politics interesting? I mean, most of the stuff I talk about are social and cultural anyway, rather than the economy and healthcare and everything like that. So I think those things can be interesting regardless. And the other point is just because I work full time, I have such a limited time and there's always massive stories to cover with gender literally every week. So I'm often kind of saying to myself, okay, you need to try and get a little bit more away from gender and do other things. But then I'm just pulled right back in. So I guess with the election, I've made a few videos about that. I have some more recorded, which I'm going to do as well. I'm talking about the US election here. And it is important that I diversify because the thing that happens with algorithms and YouTube is if I only focus on one topic, then I'm going to build a following that like those types of videos. But then if I try and do something different, it won't get really any views. So you kind of have to make sure from the beginning you're doing what you want to do. So you curate the right audience of people who are kind of interested in both, basically. So yes, I hope to do more. I'm thinking of, for a bit, kind of trying to do a little bit less on trans and LGBT. We'll see how that goes though, no promises. He also says, shout out to your fans from the start. And yes, you made the list. I actually said that already. It'd be nice if you could do some Canada stuff. Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about Canadian politics except about Trudeau, and you guys have had some of the most crazy trans stories going on there, but I would like to learn more. He says, I hope you reach 1 million soon. Well, me too. That would be a very big achievement. I would also just add one other point in that for me, sometimes it's difficult with this kind of genre because I cover current affairs, right? Kind of social politics. And the thing about that genre is you need to be really quick to respond to stories because by the time sometimes I've recorded something, edited it, you know, the thing has happened a week ago and then the news cycle has just moved on. And that makes it hard because if I wasn't working full time, I would be able to record and edit a video and get it out that same day if I really wanted to. I mean, for example, with the Josh Sider story, when he came out as not a trans woman, shocker. I woke up that morning and I was just like, oh, wow. And then I decided, okay, I'm just going to film this today, edit it today, and get it out. And then that got a lot of views because, I was one of the first to get it out there. And I remember the first video that did well for me was the reaction to the Jubilee debate, trans liberals, trans conservatives, with Blair White. And that was the same strategy. I decided to record it and edit it and get it out as fast as possible. So I think I stayed up till about 5 a.m. that night, but it was really worth it because then I hit 1,000 subscribers from that. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I just wish I had more time, more free time to cover things. And then I think it would grow a lot faster. But I'm just going to have to kind of bide my time until hopefully that day comes when I can kind of take the risk. Okay, I'm going to read another question from the community channel. So this is JJ says, I'd love you to do more in the UK. I know it isn't easy, especially since we keep getting jailed for free speech. Yeah, I know. They're going to be arresting you soon, everyone. So enjoy my content while it lasts. That would be good to focus and show another side of things like politics, LGBT stuff. So yeah, I agree. I kind of already addressed that point. And as others are covering the American side, yeah, you do a fantastic job, whatever you decide to do. Also, my question is, were you ever a lefty one time, and how did you come to change your mind? I was also once a lefty, but I changed. I wouldn't say I'm on the right, but I'm right-leaning. Yeah, so I would say yes, I was. I can talk about this more. I kind of covered it quite a bit in that video I did almost a year ago about why I left the left. And I would say I was left-wing, but very superficially. And that's because prior to sort of being indoctrinated into a lot of the woke shit and gender stuff, I was very apolitical. I was not interested in politics. Even 6 years ago, if you had asked me like what is left and right, I probably could have given you a guess, but I wouldn't have had a great idea. So I grew up very apolitical, not interested at all. I was not, the type of person to be reading the news all the time. And also, I left all social media in 2018 when I used to have a personal Instagram and Twitter. And that was because I just didn't enjoy it. I used to feel kind of obligated every once in a while just to post a picture of me being like, hey, I'm doing something interesting. And also, I just found social media super fake in terms of how people share their private lives. And now I'm not judging anyone who does that. But I just didn't enjoy it. I didn't even waste time on it really because I wasn't interested. So then I got to a point where I said, okay, I'm not going to bother with this anymore. So then I spent 5 years just without any social media. And yeah, I mean, that lifestyle is also great, I'm telling you, because there's so much less distraction. And now that I create content and I have comments, messages, like X and everything, I've definitely developed an addiction to my phone and checking things. I try my best to get space from it when I can, but I'm also always listening to things to stay well informed. There's so much going on all the time. But where was I going with that? So yeah, and then when I got involved in kind of queer circles, I imbibed a lot of their ideas around woke stuff, around race, around gender, around just like demonizing the Tory government or general right-wing politics, just saying they're all white supremacists and all straight white males are evil. There was a lot of it that I felt uncomfortable by, and I got very sick of being around people where I was sort of in a comfortable space until then someone accused me of fat phobia just out of nowhere, stuff like that. And it was very exhausting. I mean, I was in a vulnerable time with my health and with wanting to be accepted and included. And those were kind of the main outlets I had for friendship at the time. So I sort of just like tagged along with some of these ideas superficially. And then I actually have a video coming out soon just specifically describing my past when it comes to gender, because I got involved with kind of gender training stuff at work extracurricularly. And I thought I was doing a good thing because I sort of wanted something that was pro-LGBT, because a lot of my friends and stuff were in very eclectic, creative industries. A lot of them work in nightclubs and stuff. It's all very queer. And I felt a bit ostracized because I had a more conventional 9-to-5 job, and that was really looked down on in those circles and stuff. So then when I started to peak and realize these things were wrong, I considered how much I had spoken about it, and I felt kind of bad about those things. But when it comes to other politics, like, the economy, healthcare, housing, I had kind of vague platitudes when it comes to that, and how, the Tory government are just evil and, well, I probably never use the word evil, but just selfish, and they don't care about the working class and all this kind of stuff. But I really had no idea what I was talking about, to be perfectly honest. And hats off to my boyfriend, because he, since I met him, has been center right, and it didn't really affect our relationship too much, but I would kind of challenge him reactively sometimes, and he just kind of knew just not to give it any. He didn't really bother try and change my mind. He didn't really let it get to him. Now I say, why did you not engage me and kind of try to reason with me a bit more? Because I remember one time he said to me, I couldn't deal with you if you came out as non-binary, and I kind of reacted offended, because I was actually imagining him saying that in front of people I know, that I was obsessed with them liking me. And that's why I kind of just drank the Kool-Aid on a lot of these ideas, because it was just popular. And I think that is the situation so many people are in, is that their whole bubble is woke and is fed into this kind of cultural Marxist propaganda stuff, that when they get challenged by things, it's too scary to consider it. So it's easier for them to just make you a demon. But I guess for me, that group and certain people I was around, it wasn't making me very happy. So when I was presented with other ideas, I was actually really hungry for them. I just wanted to know more and more. And then I was able to kind of let go of all that social pressure. So yeah, I mean, I would still say I'm pretty centrist, but I would even maybe go center right. I mean, I think the problem is that I've never seen left-wing policies work in my life. In my country, we have a fully socialized healthcare system. It's completely broken. It's not working. Our welfare state is an absolute mess. We have like 10 million people economically inactive. The benefit system, I think it's important to have that for it to help people when they're genuinely in need, but ours is just ridiculous, and there's so many people who are just cheating the system. And then when we've had stuff like nationalized rail, that's also been a complete mess. So the problem is some of those left-wing stuff, like, nationalized public services, I love the idea of it. I love the idea of healthcare being raised by tax, trains being raised by tax, like transport, water, all the things that we need, all the things that everyone actually needs. But the issue is that I've never seen it work. So that's the problem. I think other countries like Sweden and stuff do it a lot better, I think. Don't hold me to that, because I'm not positive. So I'm sure they can be done better, but our issue is that we've just had such crazy levels of immigration that they're not able to sustain our public services or address the issues, because it's just increasing demand and demand. So I'd say I'm very center right when it comes to business and the free market, and just the free speech issue. I mean, that's all kind of on the right. So who knows? I'm still on a journey, but I am kind of more on the center right in the UK, because I think those are the kind of policies we need, because similar to the US, we've gone so far left on cultural issues, and now the economy, especially with the new government and immigration, that I just think those things really need to be addressed. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to have a look at the chat, see if there's one here. Everyone's like, you can't hear you. Okay, so Magenta, nice name, says, what gave you the idea to start the channel? Well, I come from a musical theater background, so I've always been creative and a performer. And I left that industry because it was pretty horrible. And I guess I've always wanted an outlet to be creative and to perform and stuff like that. So it was natural in that sense. But then also I just grew up with YouTube. That was kind of part of my culture as a teenager. I was watching YouTube videos from the early days, from 2006. And, in the kind of Shane Dawson days, that kind of time. And I always had an aspiration to do it. I thought it would be really cool. I kind of tried it briefly in 2018, and then briefly again in 2020. But I guess the topics I was talking about were fine, but I didn't have the same drive and passion as I do now. So what started it was I had been through, I still deal with it, but years of chronic pain, and it really changed my life. And that's a big part as well of what changed my mind about things, because you kind of you reach a stage of life where everything's so out of your control, and viewing yourself as a constant victim is just the worst thing in the world, because your life is already so difficult. So you have to try and find the good things. And that coincided with my sort of peaking on a lot of these issues. And then I decided, okay, when I kind of reached a point where I'm feeling better in terms of being able to manage my condition and live a good life, I was so happy about that I wanted to share my story, because I have kind of, it's a problem with my jaw. So I have like facial pain, and it took me years to get the correct diagnosis. I had sinus surgeries. I've had loads of different medications that were absolutely terrible. And yeah, it was just a very, very difficult time. So I wanted to kind of speak about that and hopefully help other people who might be in the same position. So I made 2 videos about that, but then this was coinciding with my realizing all this stuff about trans and all this stuff about woke. And I just really felt compelled to talk about it. I think I've always had an urge to call out shit, and sometimes it really gets me in trouble in social scenarios because I just say what's on my mind. I'm very blunt. You guys can probably tell that from my videos. And I also have always had a real aversion to injustice. And I think this comes from, I grew up with a very narcissistic father, alcoholic, and he would always gaslight me and lie to me about things and kind of mess with my head. So I used to, absolutely detest that. And I would always try to call things out and find the truth. So I think that has raised me to be quite direct when it comes to seeing injustice. And when I discovered everything was happening with trans kids and to women, and also that I wouldn't say complicit, but I sort of was part of a community that believes a lot of this stuff. And I also sometimes, said these things. All that combination, I was just like, I want to talk about this. And I was very inspired by people like Blair White, Brad Palumbo, Marcus Dibb, these people. I thought, they're extremely funny, but they're also really smart and they make great content. So yeah, I just kind of thought, okay, I'll make one video about this, talked about something that was going on in the UK with, I think, gender ideology in school. And then it just snowballed from there. I just made video after video after video. And then in December last year, I decided to start an actual podcast. So almost coming up on a year of doing that, which is crazy. And yeah, then I started reaching out to people. Most people were really happy to come on my channel. And then while this has gone on, I've just been reading books. I've read so many books about the gender stuff, learning about the history of this ideology, how it's come to pass, transgender healthcare, and also all of the politics. It's so interesting. I'm just always learning, even though I still feel like I know nothing. So, because every day I learn more and more. So that was how it got started. Michael says, what time is it? So now it's 9:24 p.m. I didn't get back from work long ago. So we like pretty people in the US. You got a boost. Thank you, Duke. That's very kind of you. I love UK politics personally. I think it's fascinating since your system is so different to ours. Most Americans don't understand it. Yes, completely agree. Keep it real cute. Shout out to Blossom. Hope Blossom's doing well. It's interesting. I wonder if people like Blossom will ever peak and realize so much of this stuff is bullshit. Oh my God. Jessica Yaniv. Yeah, that bitch. Okay, I'll pivot. Oh, hey, Pear. Thank you for joining. Love what you're doing, by the way. You always look great as well. So Pear says, if that's how I pronounce your name, I'm assuming, what is the trans children gender ideology situation like in Ireland? Is it as crazy in the US? It's pretty bad, I have to tell you, because Ireland has self-ID. And that is self-ID because they got gay marriage in 2015, I think. And the trans lobby groups are trying to find a poster child, country to pioneer self-ID. And they lobbied the government I think there was someone who was pleading a case to be recognized as a woman, and they chose Ireland to try and get it done. And, Ireland is a very small country, so I can see why they were able to kind of get their claws in there faster. And also, Ireland has, when I grew up there, it was very socially conservative, but they've kind of, similar to the US and the UK, the liberal elites, so the establishment, have had a real need to be really progressive. And the Irish establishment is very much like that. It's so much worse than here in the US because all of the main political parties, whether center right or center left, are woke and very, very progressive. So the problem with Ireland is that they do not currently have a strong center right populist movement that is trying to rebel against a lot of these ideas. So they put in self-ID, and they didn't need a referendum because it didn't change the constitution. And it's caused loads of issues for them because you've had males and women's prisons in Ireland, and to change your sex, all you need to do is just fill out a piece of a form and just send it away in the post, and then that's it. You can change all your gender markers. So it has caused issues. And then trans kids, as far as I know, they were actually being referred to the Tavistock Clinic in London if you were going through the public healthcare system. But I think they can still go privately. And obviously puberty blockers are not banned there. They're only banned in the UK. So I really don't think it's a good situation. Ireland is very tribal and very small. So once ideas get hold, it's really difficult to weed them out. And people, a lot of people never leave their hometowns. They stay in insular bubbles. So I'd say in the cities, there's a lot of people that believe in this stuff. And this has come to light for me, especially recently, with just, a lot of people I know or other people know in Ireland are very much still believing in the trans child and that the CAS report is bogus and puberty blockers are life-saving. Like, it's quite scary. So yeah, I'm definitely prouder to be in the UK when it comes to that stuff. So thank you for that question. I'll pivot back to the community channel. Sky says, so hello, Sky. Shout out to Sky. I gave a shout out to you on my podcast. You probably see that. But big supporter, community channel member, and I really appreciate it. So who's someone you'd love to get as a guest that you would never consider asking? So I am not beyond the realms of not asking anyone. I think, you can always just try. What's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say no. But the strategy I've tried to choose is, while my platform is growing, not going for too big people too soon. And I feel like that, everyone I've asked for so far, it's worked pretty well. Some people are just really supportive anyway, like Book Angel, and we had talked a lot. So there's definitely a lot of people on my list, and some of them I kind of want to bide my time until I have a bigger platform. But I would absolutely love to have Blair White. It's probably my biggest one. I think Blair is just the funniest person, regardless of what you think about trans, what you think about pronouns, or all those kind of things. I genuinely think she is just such a comedian, and maybe it's just because it's the type of humor that I love. And yeah, she can get a bit bitchy, but can't we all? And then I also love Douglas Murray, if any of you know him. He's a journalist, has written many books about, critical of immigration and Islam, and he's gay as well. So I really admire how, despite his sexuality, he just kind of never gave into that identity politics stuff, and he's always been a free thinker. So yeah, I'm not going to be asking Elon Musk or any of these people anytime soon, but who knows? So those are two people I'd really love to have on, but there's so many more in my list. So Ray Alex Williams says Josh Sider is AGP. Yes, I'm skeptical too, because who knows? It might be kind of an outlet for that. And not all AGPs get dysphoric and want to transition. Some of them just enjoy it, but who knows? It's either that, or it's just because, he finished his whole hoax and then now he's getting less views and he's kind of saying, well, what do I do now for attention? Because whether you agree with what he did or not, and I think it was pretty funny, and some of it really called out some of the bullshit, it was a grift and it wasn't very authentic. Hello, Jack. Why don't you get rid of that mustache, maybe making it a lock instead? Please tell me that influencer you created never comes back. It was awful to watch. I have no idea what you're talking about. Why don't you get rid of the mustache? Well, I like it. So that's why I don't get rid of it. And please tell me that influencer you're created is never coming back. I don't know what that means, so maybe you could explain, but thank you for the super chat as well. Derek says, do you think we will finally get to a place when everyone we love the sex body we are born in and stop obsession with trying to appropriate the opposite sex? I think we'll reach a point where far less people are interested in this because a lot of the medical scandals will come out and mainstream media will be unable to avoid the challenges that come with women, sports, kids, especially because, like we're seeing in the US, a lot of people are rejecting this stuff. And the Trump presidency, I think, is not going to put up with it. So the mainstream media need to make money. So if no one is interested, they're eventually going to have to move on to something else. So that's one thing. But then the problem is there will always be autogynephilic men, and that problem is getting worse because of the internet, because of Reddit, because of sissy porn, because of the ideology. And then there will always be hyper-feminine gay men who struggle to move through society. And there are some other questions as well, so I might come back to that. But I do think like all medical scandals will reach a point where we'll look back on it. But I'm not convinced that, you know, we'll reach a point where no one's transitioning. I don't know, because obviously there was a time 100 years ago when that was just not possible. So it was only very, very fringe kind of, it was just very unusual to find someone who tried to find a doctor saying, please do this to me. So I do think the medical route being available drives demand. So people, you know, without that, someone would never even consider it. So if you're an autogynephile, you would maybe not obsess over it so much to the point where you just need to do it. Or if you're, I mean, in the past, really feminine gay men had to conceal their gender expression. So it's very difficult to know because we've not really dealt with anything like this before. Mustaches rock. Thank you for backing me up. We have the same problem in Sweden. Yes. Love your content and mustache. Thank you. Oh, met you once at the Lost Boys screening. I sat next to you. Oh, great. Yes. I think I remember that. But yes, thank you for that. That was good. I probably would have asked for your autograph. Well, I've actually given my autograph once now, which was hilarious. But I also, for the first time, got spotted on the street a few days ago. So yeah, it is funny because you want to be able to tell those stories, but then not sound like an absolute douchebag. I'm sorry about your father, Jack. I've noticed this pattern with gay men. Yeah, a lot of gay men have daddy issues or absent dads. So I will never really know, will we, what causes homosexuality, but my current theories are kind of a mixture of a predisposition, hormonally or biologically, and then perhaps early, you know, your experiences in the first like 3 years of your life. But who knows? It doesn't really matter because it's cemented in. Actually surprised I haven't seen a Blossom Trump meltdown video. Yeah, that would be good. Blossom would make it all about Blossom. Will you do a video with Mr. Menno? So someone else asked about this in the community channel, so I'll talk about that now. Are you friends with Mr. Menno? So me and Mr. Menno have met, I think, maybe 4 times in person. The first time we went for a coffee together and just chatted about this stuff. And then the other times have just been at big events like the LGBT Alliance conference and the Lost Boys screening. So I don't know him very well, to be perfectly honest. I wouldn't say we're friends because we don't chat that often, but we sent the occasional DM and stuff like that. And I respect what he does. I mean, I think we take very different approaches and we probably disagree on some issues, but I think it's really important that anyone in this conversation can express what they think, because we're never going to reach a consensus if we don't. You know, if the consensus is actually trans women are women, you know, if it's that extreme, and then if that is the truth, then I think we will eventually reach that. And when you have people like Kelly J. Keane and Mr. Menno, there might be some things I disagree with they say or the way they say it. but I would, protect their right to say those things to the end. And I don't, I'm perfectly comfortable chatting to them about it and everything. So it would be cool to do a collab sometime and like a little debate with him. But someone else asked me about Mr. Meno, trying to find it. It was basically to do with Ty Rivera. Oh yeah. So do you have an opinion on the disagreement between Meno and Ty? Personally, it caused me to move further into picking a side, TRA versus turf. Contrary to Ty's goal, I wasn't even in that frame of mind until the ironic insults got slung. So I don't know a lot about that issue. I was kind of on X when it was all going off, and I accidentally stepped my foot in it because I had no idea what was happening, and I commented on one of Ty's posts, and Ty did not appreciate that. I was just making a joke, but I thought I didn't realize this whole war was going on. So let me know if I'm wrong, but my impression of that whole thing was Ty is talking about kind of true trans and people who actually are trans women, and then people who are kind of fake trans. And I think Mr. Meno's argument might be there is no such thing as trans. I'm not 100% on that, but I guess, yeah, I find it sad to see those kind of pylons because they are largely from the same aisle. You might disagree with that, actually. You might think they're on totally different sides. But, it's difficult to see all of this infighting on the gender critical side because I think it's so much better that we unite and accept that we have different motivations for talking about this. My main one is gay kids. And we also have different ideas of how to approach the conversation. So some people believe in reality, they believe in biology, they don't think the sports thing should happen, the kid thing should happen, and that women's spaces should be protected, but they don't mind using the pronoun occasionally and just like that kind of thing. And that's kind of where I sit. Some people are completely hardline and they say, if we give away our language, we give away our spaces. Now, I'm totally fine with that opinion. I think it makes situations difficult sometimes. And I think people who are on the fence or completely on the other side are likely not to listen to those people at all. It was kind of people more in the middle that got me thinking. So I think all of that crazy fighting, it's kind of sad to see that. I try not to get involved in that, not be too combative, because you can very easily tweet things in a rage and just regret it. And I have regretted things I've tweeted before. So hopefully they'll they'll make amends, but I don't think they like each other very much. I'm not sure. And then with Ty, I was going to address this in a video, but then I decided not to because I just didn't want to get involved in too much of this stuff. But he did make a video that had me in it, and he talked about me. And it was a bit disappointing, to be honest, because I've always really respected Ty and I've watched a lot of his content and I agree with him on so many things. So I guess for me, if it was someone who agrees on lots of things and is kind of talking about a lot of similar issues, I would rather have them on my channel and have a conversation with them and maybe debate a few little issues instead of kind of making a video about them. So, me and Buck Angel will disagree on a couple of things, but I wouldn't make a video about Buck kind of dissecting what he says. That's just me. I'd rather make videos about people who are, so far away from what I think, so I can try and debunk what they're saying. So that was kind of disappointing because I really felt like some of my opinions were not represented accurately at all. And then I did have a lot of people defending me in the comments, which is good. But then some of the comments about me were really nasty as well. So yeah, but the thing is, like, making videos online, and anyone has the freedom to respond to them. And I think if anyone wants to, then you go ahead and stuff like that. But I guess for me, I try and recognize who are potential allies in this space. But it also makes you realize you can't really trust people you meet online. Everyone is here for their own reasons. And, I hope Ty continues to make great content. I'm sure he will, and do his thing. Do any of you guys watch his channel? Okay, I'm going to try and read some of the comments. It's actually really hard to kind of keep up with these. So let me see. Love Douglas Murray. Yes, me too. Trying to look for a question mark. Hi, Sophie. You're so great. Shout out to Sophie. We've chatted a lot on Instagram about everything going on. Ty Rivera is very off about you. Thank you. And I don't wish any ill on Ty at all. I think, he seems like a great guy. As an Israeli, I'd be happy to give you information about what is happening here. Where can I contact you? So do you mean about gender or do you mean about the conflict? I mean, I'll post my email in the chat. 1 second. Yeah, you can email me or you can post something in the chat. Always interested in what you have to say. So Ophelia, I think, is that how I say your name? I don't know if that's your actual name, but also been here for ages, so I really appreciate that. So number one, what are some ways you are keeping your own mental health from plummeting among the increasing negative reactions and animosity towards your content? Yeah, that's a great question because it is difficult. I think it comes in waves for me because most of the time I'm just doing my thing online, interacting with people online, and then I don't really talk about it too much in my personal life. My best friend is just as interested in this stuff as me, so he watches like every single video and always kind of talks to me about the videos and stuff like that. So that's good. And then my boyfriend will just tune in very occasionally. Like he watched my interview with the detransitioner Ariel a couple of days ago. So we talk about it sometimes. My mom watches every video too, so I speak to her about it. But I think it's difficult. I think the hardest thing is that you kind of walk through the world and you just don't know who you can trust to basically, first of all, tell them you do this. And then second of all, what do they think? So that is difficult, having a bit of a paranoia, because when it's, for example, a friend of a friend and I'm at a party, I don't know if they've seen it or not. And I don't know if they've seen it and they absolutely hate it. And that anxiety is difficult to deal with. And having an underlying anxiety of, just will I get cancelled? Will I lose my job? Like, will my life fall apart? That is something that's at the background of my mind sometimes. But then also I just try and cognitive behavioral therapy helps because I just try and tell myself, nothing bad has happened. Everything's good. I have so many supporters. I mean, that's the best thing that gets me through it, because the amount of people I've connected with on YouTube, on Instagram, email, Substack, and then all of the more high profile people I've connected with and then met in person, that reassures me that this work is, I say work, but talking about this stuff is really, really important. And especially the majority of my DMs are from gay men who say things like, thank you so much for doing this stuff. Love your content. I can't talk to any of my friends about this. I have to keep silent, or, I've lost my friends because of this. I've lost family members because of this. And those things really keep me going, because it means that this thing is really important, because it's not just affecting trans people and people who've been harmed by the movement. It's affecting just everyday people who want to be able to talk about it openly and say, you know what, those kids being sterilized, like, do you know that they're mostly gay? Do you know that? So yeah, it's hard. I mean, sometimes staying in a little bit of a bubble helps with me, because I am around a lot of other people who remind me, like, no. They say you're on the right side of history, which I don't like using that term because I think it's a bit arrogant and I always want to be open to my mind changing. But I've just seen so much concrete evidence about all this stuff and researched it so deeply. I don't think there's anyone I know personally in my life who've researched this stuff as deeply as I have. And it's impossible to ignore. So I also just keep trying and telling myself, like, you're trying to discover the truth, you're trying to discover reality, and eventually these things will come down, and the people who are peddling it still and refuse to listen, they're gonna have a much worse reality than I will, because they're gonna have to either keep believing it forever, or have to admit that they were wrong and that they've potentially lured other people into thinking of this, and even maybe giving me an apology because I get set back a lot, and this has kind of been on my mind a lot recently with stuff that's happened. But when people in real life judge me so heavily and say things like I'm hateful, and I have so much hate within me, and just, very, very harsh statements about me. And, I can sit here and pretend, oh, I have a thick skin, I don't care what people think. But no, everyone does. Most people do. I think it's a good sign, and because everyone wants to have relationships. And when it's people I love and people that have been in my life my whole life or a long time, trying to sit and accept that they think I'm a hateful person or transphobic or just all these nasty things, it's really difficult to accept. And then it's difficult to accept that that dynamic is going to change. And I try my best to, argue my points and explain where I'm coming from. But these ideas, they're so ideological that people don't want to listen. And the thing is, if anyone just gave my content a bit of time and watched some of my long form interviews, like, they would see that I'm not hateful, and actually I'm very I try my best to explore these topics deeply, and try and find some balance and equilibrium in between, because online I get more hate from gender critical feminists than I do trans activists, because I'm not towing the line with the pronouns and with kind of giving sympathy to people with AGP who don't want to harm anyone and who don't know what to do. So, Blair White said it, like, I get it from both ends, and I'm not even doing OnlyFans. Like, that is the situation, and it can be lonely. But luckily, all of my very close friends in my life are with me. They don't really care. They're just very chill about it. They're like, yeah, you do your thing. And then when I explain to them the arguments, they can't really argue them. So I'm very, very lucky for that. I think, like, keep my supporters close, keep my friends close, always keep questioning myself and my conclusions, not getting locked in an echo chamber. And then with the rest of the people, I just have to learn to accept that I'm choosing to do this. You take a risk, people will think what they like, and that's it, really. I mean, sometimes I can see their point when it comes to, like, the woke TikTok reactions, and I can get quite harsh. And I think the problem is that people go on my channel and they just look at a few of my shorts, and they're just such small snippets of my videos. And some people just write me off after that. So that's difficult, because if they actually gave the time to engage with the full video, I really don't think that they would be able to say, like, you just hate trans people. I don't think so anyway. So Mark says, joins late, interesting chat. Do you, by chance, hear of Sam Harris's podcast following the US election? Interesting point of view on how gender ideology now defines the Democratic Party. Yeah, I actually don't know who Sam Harris is. I might, if he's a big name, I might recognize him or her. But yeah, I will definitely look that up and see. But it's totally crazy. Like, how crazy is it that the Democrats have lost an election? And a big reason for that is because of gender ideology and giving kids puberty blockers and letting men play in women's sports. This is such a weird, freaky time that a whole party has lost an election. And of course, they lost it on the economy and immigration and the fact that Kamala Harris couldn't speak. But it's mad. And I guess it's not about trans, really. It's about a broader problem with censorship and mainstream media establishment control. And trans happens to be one of the topics that they've latched onto. So it does give me hope. I think, reservations about Trump, and everyone's coming at me now accusing me of being this, like, red pill Trump supporter. That's not the case. I would have rather someone like Ron DeSantis get it. And I really like Tulsi Gabbard as well. And I do think Trump is a nutcase, and he's probably done bad things in his life. But what gives me hope is the rejection of the Democrats by the American public, because your average person is not stupid. They can see through this shit. They're not in woke bubbles, and they just want a peaceful life without all of this crazy identity politics. So that really does give me hope. But our party in the UK, who just got empowered, they're going full steam ahead with it. So we're up for a rough time here. What would you say asexuality is? Yeah, so obviously that's been made into an identity and part of the umbrella. But from my understanding, I'm not sure if someone is born asexual. Well, so from my understanding, there's a couple of ways. So one is through trauma, and someone has been harmed so deeply that they reject their sexuality, and they repress their sexuality so much that they can't get in touch with it unless they perhaps unpack their trauma. And the other point is that the majority of autistic people are actually asexual. And that's because if you are autistic or quite autistic, sometimes it's difficult to develop a capacity for romantic and sexual attraction. And Dr. Az Hakim talked to me about this because a lot of people presenting with gender dysphoria are autistic. And he said that they would engage sexually, but they would not experience sex the same way other people would, because they would sort of be able to climax, but it would kind of just be take it or leave it type of thing. So I do think those two things are very pertinent to understanding asexuality. And beyond that, I'm not sure. Like, is it a thing as far as there are some people who don't want sex? I guess so. Is it innate? I'm not sure. Is it related to autism? Probably. Does it need to be part of an umbrella? Probably not. Do we need to fight for asexual rights? Probably not. Do you listen to Red Scare? Also have no idea what that is. So please let me know and I will check it out. There's so many, like, even though I'm so in the internet ecosystem, people all the time say, have you listened to this thing? And I'm like, no, that's what's overwhelming about this, is that there's the sheer volume of content coming out every single day is a lot. And in politics, my genre, a lot of people upload once every single day. So it's really hard to keep up with having a full-time job. Jeremy says, what is your support system like outside of YouTube? I think I kind of addressed that before with my boyfriend and my friends, my mom. But there are extended people in my life that things have become a lot more difficult with. Okay, let's go back to the community channel. One says, what inspired you to become a creator? But I covered that at the start. So why do some men get the problem to women's rights that trans causes others, even though who are supportive seem not to when they're put on the spot? For example, there are men who say that they are gender critical, who are friends with AGPs and insist their friends should be allowed special exceptions. There was a recent James Whale interview of Kelly J. Keane, which proved that. Yeah, I've not seen this either. You're pulling out all the things I've not seen. James Whale. So I'd need another example, but I do agree in that if you want to protect, so my stance is, and people think this is really hardline, but it just makes sense. My stance is if you want to protect women, then all males need to stay out of their spaces. That includes passing trans women, and it includes any, right? So that's what I think it should be. But I think if that's going to be the case, then we need third spaces everywhere, because I don't want trans people to feel compelled to go into, the men's bathroom if they're a trans woman and they pass, because I also care about them. And then the problem is that when we get to the situation of there are only 2 bathrooms and a trans woman passes fully or almost passes, that situation, I just don't know. I think while we have this issue and muddling through it, you have to kind of choose the option which is least disruptive for you. And I can kind of understand the argument of, well, this male decided to transition, so it's on them, it's not on women. So I understand that, but then also if you are passing, like, you're not going to be causing any issues. So that is my stance, but I do think it's possible to be friends with an AGP and still support women. I think I'll continue to talk about this because no matter how much I talk about it, everyone is still just on one extreme or the other. Trans activists say AGP doesn't exist. And some of the gender critical movement says it is only a perverted fetish and that's it. And there's no nuance to it. But the fact is, it's a type of sexuality, really. And some of these males are just more comfortable presenting more feminine. And if some of them, like Phil Illy, for example, know they're male and don't infringe on women and just prefer wearing feminine clothing, I do not think that they're coercing people in public into a sex act. And that really is telling of what some biological women don't understand about male sexuality, because male sexuality tends to come in bursts. And, it's impossible just to be aroused every second of every day. But also, if I'm walking down the street and I have thoughts in my head, you never know when a man is kind of getting semi-aroused, but most men, it doesn't affect other people because they know how to behave in public. So if you happen to be wearing women's clothing and you're behaving perfectly, nicely, if it's not fetish gear, even I recognize some AGPs through their dysphoria. If their AGP is really bad, transition and it helps them. I'm also actually not against that, but I want better scientific studies. I want better therapy, and I want their decision to transition to be a promise that they do not. That does not mean that they are actually women or that they can infringe on women or kids. Julie says, I'd love to have this conversation with you personally sometime. I don't know if you posted something else before, but yeah, DM me, Instagram, X, or my email is fine. I was married for 9 years and it destroyed my marriage. So is that, I'm really sorry to hear that. Is that, you mean fights over gender, or did someone leave you to transition? Do you feel people like us are back in the dark days that we need to secretly meet up to discuss these views? I actually agree with this. So I tweeted a few days ago, gay people have to come out twice. The first time is coming out as gay, and the second time is coming out as gender critical or just non-woke. So if you're a gay that, is center right, even in economics, if you have opinions about immigration, if you don't believe in gender ideology, if you don't think trans kids should transition, you have to come out again. And now what's happening is sometimes I meet a gay guy and it reaches a point where both of us are like, oh my God, you too, oh my God. It's kind of an unspoken thing for a while. And that is just nuts, because it's like back in the old days, your gaydar would kind of recognize, oh, is this guy gay? So it's like that again. And I think people just, people that don't get this, it's not just about gay kids, it's about how it's affected gay people in terms of the community. I live in London, which is very woke, and it's very hard to go out into gay spaces here without being pulled into conversations about all this shit. And a lot of people I used to hang out with is just not the same, because either A, they know I do this, or B, we just see things so differently now, and it's impossible to go out without non-binary and flags being shoved in your face. And the fact that everyone sees pride in LGBT as this like crazy pronoun world planet, it's difficult. And it's also quite a lonely feeling when you're in gay spaces and you end up in a conversation and you just have to kind of keep quiet. I absolutely hate that. I can't bear it. I still sometimes say things and like they don't go down well. Stuff like, what does queer even mean? I mean, that's like a big question for people who are like, as a queer person, because it's their whole identity. But in actual fact, what does it mean? Because can anyone be queer? Yes. Okay, then what's the point? It's just stupid. So yeah, I just think it's affected gay people in just so many ways, in terms of our community, in terms of how people see us, in terms of all of our charities, what they fight for. Like they're not interested in gay issues anymore. They're just interested in trans. And I think it's going to take non-gay people a long time to learn that, because most of the woke people all subscribe to the intersectionality oppression scale. And if you're white, that means you can't talk about Black people. And if you're gay, that means you can't talk about trans. So I could diss a cis straight guy, in their world. I could talk about toxic masculinity and straight men all I want. But as soon as I mention something about trans, it's no. You're not trans. You're a cis white gay guy, and you can't talk on this. So I think until they break out of that, they're not able to hear gay people's concerns, because it's like, well, you're not as oppressed as them, so check your privilege and shut up. Someone said, would you ever move to America? Right? I think someone said that. Never say never. Both my sisters live in the US, in New York and Illinois, and I'm hoping to go see them soon. So maybe, but my boyfriend runs a business in the UK, so I'm just not sure how that would work. But it is more tempting I'd love to just visit Texas and some of those kind of freedom places, because the UK is looking so dire with our new big states, big tax, big debt, big on woke, big on immigration, government. I just really don't see things here getting more free, you know, threats to freedom of speech. Michael says, where are you from? Surely you know I'm Irish by now. You have to know that. People always find my accent really difficult to understand. What do you think of Douglas Murray's The Strange Death of Europe? So I've only read The War in the West, which was excellent, but that is on my list. I've actually downloaded the audiobook already. I'm currently finishing my friend Andy No's book about Antifa. And then, yeah, I want to read all his books, but I just saw on X he announced he's bringing out a book next week on democracies and death cults. Sorry, next year. He's bringing it out in April. My request for contact is due to asexuality. Oh, yeah. Please contact me anytime. I try to respond to all DMs. It may take me a couple of days, but I do. Have you ever heard of Dave Rubin? Of course. Yeah, I love Dave Rubin. I tune into his show sometimes, and I like him a lot. I think, first of all, he looks amazing for his age. Just want to point that out. I really like him. What I like about him is that he's been on a political journey, so he's open to changing his mind. And I've tried to see a decent amount of him. I think I need to see a lot more to form an opinion, but he seems like a logical, sensible person. I don't know if he's kind of, you know, gone just from one extreme to the next, but I'd need to watch more. But I do really enjoy watching his show. Do you avoid discussing politics with friends? Certain friends. It depends on the person. But my closest friends, no, because a lot of us are aligned. But sometimes I just avoid it because I spend so much of my time talking to a camera about it and talking online about it that I just need to step away. And I also am aware that I'm quite obsessed about this stuff, and a lot of my friends engage with it, but they are not as interested. So I have to be a bit careful of not just like bombing them with politics constantly, because that can get pretty annoying. Okay, I'm going to go back to the community channel. We're already at an hour, so I'm going to try and go through some questions faster. How did your partner react when he saw your interview with Helen Joyce? Yeah, he absolutely loved it. He didn't find out till it was on my story. So he messaged me saying, "Is that you with Helen?" And he watched all of it. He said, "Can we please watch it together?" And even though I had done the interview and edited the whole interview and watched it on the live, then I said to him, "Okay, yeah." So I watched it with him. But he loves her, and he got to meet her in person at the LGBT Alliance as well. So he was very pleased with that. What do gay men think about men who date trans women? That's an interesting point. So I think mainstream gays, and by that I mean kind of the woke gays, I don't mean to just generalize, but just for the purpose of this analogy, let's go with that. I think a lot of them think that they are women, and then they probably think the men who date them are straight. So that's probably what they think. And for people like me, I think it's a really interesting topic, because for the men who date trans women who claim to be straight, the fact is the vast majority of them are bisexual. So they're interested in women and trans women. And what they're actually interested in is women and hyper feminine men. So they are bisexual, but they're not into gay men like me, which is why people don't realize that they're not straight. So they're usually never into conventionally looking men. And then what trans has given them is a way to conceal their sexuality and internalize homophobia. So I think a lot of these men really want to be with a feminized male, but they don't want to admit the fact that they're bi or that they are in a homosexual relationship. I mean, when you say is being with a trans woman gay, scientifically it is, because it's homosexual, it's two males. But is it the same thing as the way I'm gay? Not exactly. I think it's bisexual. And I think the vast majority of those men are into women and then feminized men. And then what trans has done is allowed them to kind of realize that dream even further, because then they can get men with breasts and, you know, with electrolysis and with other plastic surgery and estrogen. So they can have an even more feminized male than they would have otherwise. And I think this point is really important for teasing out what's going on with trans, because I think a big reason gay men transition is because, one, they are hyper feminine, and it's really difficult moving through the world like that, because There aren't many people like you out there. Most gay men are not interested in hyper feminine men because they like men. And then it's really difficult to find a partner, because if you are a hyper femme gay man, the only men who want to get with you are the closeted bisexual men who like feminized males, and they might hit you up on Grindr and they might have sex with you, but the vast majority of them will never be in a public open relationship with you, which then leads to these men fetishizing trans women and not considering them as, or fetishizing feminized gay men or trans women and not considering being in a relationship with them. And a lot of them can only accept the fact to be in a relationship with them if the person fully transitions, because then they can kind of keep up an illusion more that, well, I don't actually like men, even though they like having a dick in their face. It's it's a complex issue, but I think it's not just gay males' experience which is driving transition. It's actually these bisexual males' experience too, because I have a lot of compassion for these gay men who basically have no dating pool and probably really suffer from that, feel really lonely, and then recognize the type of men that are interested in them. And for some of them, transitioning with the current way things are, I can understand how that might be easier, you know? I mean, Blair White talks about that. She says, like, living as a gay man just wasn't working for me. And then she transitioned and she was able to live, not facing that stigma of being a hyper feminine man, or not face, even I think on videos her partner has said, I'm more straight. So there's a lot of males who won't consider being with these type of males unless they are fully transitioned. So I think that's really big important, because if we want to help gay men just be really feminine without transitioning, it won't work unless these bisexual men learn to accept their sexual desires and their sexuality, instead of having to gaslight themselves into the fact that they are straight by being with trans women in the form of fetishized or in the form of feminized men. So it's a very complicated topic. What do you think about Texas? I've never been there, but everything I've heard about it sounds great. I'd love to visit. That's all I know, really. Do you play video games? I love video games, but I don't have much time for them now. I grew up with, Nintendo consoles. So I had Nintendo 64, Nintendo DS. I have a Nintendo Switch, and I still play games on that sometimes. I haven't for a while, but I played a few last year. And my boyfriend bought me Hogwarts Legacy, which I've still not played, but that is something I need to do this Christmas, because I do love gaming. If any of you ever played, this is going to be embarrassing now, Neopets. I grew up obsessed with that website for about 8 years of my life. I was fully obsessed. So yeah, I love gaming. I also had a PS2 when I was growing up, but I would really like to game more. It's just, my time is just so limited now with job, trying to work out, trying to be social. I'm going to go back to the community page. What do you think about trans men and women and even biological people dating a straight person without telling them their orientation? Yeah, I'm just completely against that. Like, if you're going to date someone, you have to tell them what sex you are. And that's it. I just don't think it's fair. It's not going to end well for anyone, because even if I was into trans men, if the guy didn't tell me till the third date, I would feel it would just break a sense of trust between us. I think there are some gay men out there who gaslight themselves into thinking they're also into trans men. So maybe they wouldn't care because they would think this makes me look more progressive now. But I think it's a big no-no. How do you keep your head on straight, having people threaten you, generally being mean, so on edge? My anxiety would be up to 90. So I did talk about that earlier, how I kind of manage dealing with all this stuff. And have you lost any friends? Yes. I haven't lost any really close friends. I lost like a whole large group of friends who canceled me, but I wasn't in touch with any of them often. But in terms of really close friends, I don't think so, which is a relief. But there are some people now who are it's incredibly uncomfortable to be around them. And, I struggle with that. Like, it is very anxiety provoking to think that someone might think that you are like a Nazi. That is not a good feeling. I do believe I'm a good person. I do know that I can be very opinionated, I can be harsh, but I suppose that just comes from a place of being a bit of a silly comedic, but also the underlying reasons for talking about this stuff are so important. And I'm so sick of these people, these non-binary activists on TikTok, just like ruling the roost and changing everything about this community. And, you know, they are literally just a god in the eyes of all this pride LGBT stuff. You can't criticize them and they can say whatever they want. Right? That James Rose guy that I did TikToxic on, like, he spreads the most harmful, vile messaging about women and kids and is just a complete narcissist. And did I get really harsh on him? Yes. You know, could you argue that's important? Yes. Can I see the other side to it? Also, yes. I don't know. So Mr. Menno actually commented on my post saying, what do you look at differently now from, say, 6 months ago? What has your opinion shifted on? This is a very good question. I would say lots of things. When I started talking about stuff, I was kind of like, I'm going to be so centrist, like, you know, I'm not going to be left or right, whatever. I think I've changed my mind a little bit on that, in kind of leaning into either side more, depending on what I think, and now definitely more center right on a lot of this stuff. But when I first started, I very much believed in the true trans notion, in that it kind of goes something like this. And this is something Ty talks about. So Ty will say, but there are people who are actually trans, who actually have gender dysphoria and need to transition. So I don't believe in true trans. And there's a few ways we can look at this, right? If you say true trans is someone who transitions and has a successful outcome and don't regret it and are happy, then that's true trans. I'm happy for that to be true trans in that context. If you think true trans is someone is born a certain way, that means they were always trans, I don't believe that. There's no evidence for that. These things about brain scans have zero evidence. I mean, in all the studies, they can't control for sexuality. And you can see that there's a clear difference on average between straight men and gay men's brain structures. So a lot of it, there's just a confounding factor for that. And I've researched it so deeply now that it's pretty obvious to me that the pathways into transition depend on, you know, your sexuality, whether that's gay or AGP or bi or whatever, and then your experiences in life, trauma, bullying, abuse, autism, all of these things, autogynephilia. So true trans is not a thing in terms of that. However, I recognize that some people transition and they have a much more successful outcome. So you could say Blair White is true trans in that sense, because it works for Blair. Blair has no regrets. She's very successful. She seems to have a good quality of life. Same with Book Angel. You know, Book spent years not, you know, deciding and then transitioned when he was 30. So in that sense, there's a true trans. But were they both born destined to be that way? I don't think so. I think life has many different experiences. But that doesn't mean it wasn't the right decision. And I also think people talk about true trans because they say people like Blair are true trans, but autogynephiles are not. And I think they're missing a point there, because they fail to recognize the homosexual pathway to transition, when gay people often suffer trauma, bullying, abuse, sexual assault, and just it being impossible for them to move through the world as hyperfeminine gay men, therefore developing dysphoria, being really lonely, like the stuff I talked about before, and transitioning. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I don't think people that buy into like Book and Blair are true trans, I don't think they understand that pathway. And then the second point is that I think an autogynephile can have a good outcome with transition. I know some online who are actually passing, and they do not infringe on women or women's spaces. They don't think kids should transition. And people don't understand that autogynephiles also experience dysphoria, their own version, because they have a sexuality that can never be squared. You know, they desire to be a woman, and a lot of them also have autoandrophobia, like Ari talked about in my last detransitioner interview, in that they can't bear their male body. So I think some of them experience dysphoria, and actually they seem to experience the more tricky kind of dysphoria because it's more anatomical, Whereas for the gay men who transition, they often arrive at that obsession over their body because of societal factors. So if you think about it, if you're a girl who grows up in a society that never really talks about body weight, you may not really obsess over your body weight. But then if you go to school and you are just a normal size, but then everyone you're seeing is stick thin and all the people on Instagram, that can then make you obsess over your body. And then you think you need to lose loads of weight. And it's the same thing with a lot of these gay males, is that if they were just allowed to be hyper feminine gay men and they had a dating pool of people who are interested in them, they could have a good life, then they probably wouldn't become dysphoric about their bodies, or at least after puberty wouldn't. But the problem is when society is rejecting you and when your life is so difficult, and when you realize that all the people you can relate to are women and they're living good lives, then you can become phobic of your own body. You know, these things are so, it's like a feedback loop. So that's what I've changed my mind on the most. I don't believe in true trans, but I do recognize that for a very tiny percentage, perhaps, they have successful outcomes. Could they have had a different outcome? Who knows? And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I feel really differently about. Oh yeah, LGB without the T. So I would have said no separation before, because there are some trans people I really like. And like I said, a lot of these trans women are kind of a variant of gay men. So in that sense, they're still part of the G. But with the AGP stuff, even though I can debate that from a position of nuance, that is just not the same as me. Like, as in, it's a very, very different thing. They're going to have very different needs, different types of counseling, therapy, treatments. And I do think it's important to be able to separate the LGB from the T, given the scenario. So if you want to set up an LGB charity or institution, you should be allowed to do that without being attacked by trans activists and trying to be brought down. If you want to set up a bar that is only for L or G, and by that I mean people who are actually female or actually male, you should be able to do that without being shut down. But then if another private institution wants to be LGBT, then I think that's fine. But I don't think it's fair that we have to be completely inclusive 100% of the time, because then we can't address our own needs. You know, gay men have different needs to lesbians. Those two groups have very different needs to the trans community and like the non-binary community, the narcissist community, pretty much. And it's not fair that in London, for example, we have Pride, which is just everything, which is basically just gender. Then we have trans pride, so they get their own pride. And then we have Black pride. So it's like, what happened to the gays? You know? And the fact that there is no gay app now, Grindr is like, with Grindr, I don't use it because I'm in a relationship, but I care about it still. You can filter for trans people. So you can specifically look at only trans people, but you cannot specifically look at only cis people. And I say that with quotations, because trans men are men. And that is just homophobic. It's basically saying this is supposed to be for gay men. Now it's for everyone. And you can't filter out women. So for that reason, I think we need to separate the LGB from the T, but it can depend on the organization. I want us to be able to have separate institutions and initiatives and movements, and just for people to accept that and leave us alone. And then if you want to be fully LGBTQIA+, PPZ, whatever, go for it. So that's something else I've changed my mind on, because before I was like, no separation. I want to bridge the gap. I want to kind of bring people together, but I really do understand the arguments for it now. So I also had a Q&A poll. So one person asked me, how tall am I? So I'm 6 foot, which I like. It's a good height. It's not too tall, but it's also not short. Nothing wrong with either of those things. My boyfriend is 6'2", which was interesting because I'd only ever been with shorter guys before that. Who's your favorite subscriber? Hint, Cherry. So I don't know if Cherry's here, but you're one of them, Cherry. Michael, you're always here. Sky, you're always here. There's loads of more people that your names are probably just going out of my head right now. But I see your names just all the time coming back, and I really appreciate it. Will you visit the US for any content? I'd love to do that. I mean, I've been to quite a lot of places in the US. I've been to California, Arizona, Nevada. I've been to New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts. So, and like, Illinois, Chicago. So, like I said, I have 2 sisters in the US. So I'm going to definitely be going there throughout my life. And yeah, I might be able to think of something fun to do there, if it's a collaboration with someone or interviewing woke people on the street. I'm down for it. Do you consider yourself a monarchist? I'm sort of just like, my mind has changed on this too, because when I was in the woke bubble, I was like, oh, the royals are just a colonial kind of racist, white supremacist, like misogynist institution, and they're greedy, and it's, blah, 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 blah. So I don't think that. I think that the royals are part of the fabric of British culture and what has made Britain what it is. And I think British culture has been diluted so much and is at such a big threat that I think to abolish the monarchy would just make us lose any sense of like, what is British? I'm not British, I'm Irish. And I did not like growing up in Ireland. I had a pretty terrible time. And I always wanted to move to England because I love England. And I'm so glad I did. And I have a great life here. So I really want to protect England and Britain and the kind of things that make it great. But a lot of that is being ditched now, and just being anything that's defined as British is just like racism, basically. So with the monarchy, I kind of don't really care too much for them. Like, I'm never interested in stories about the royals, Harry and Meghan. I'm just so sick of all that shit. Like, I can't be bothered to hear more about them. I obviously care about some of the family being sick with cancer and stuff, but I do recognize that some people just think they should be gone. I don't think it's fair, because some people find a lot of comfort in the royal family, especially some older people. And you never know what type of figures people look up to. Some people look up to God. Some people look up to pop stars. Some people look up to the royals. And, it's a defining characteristic of them being English and British. So I am ambivalent, but I don't think they should be abolished. I don't think. So I have quite a long question here. I'm just going to take a point and look in the chat. I think I'm going to try and end this in 10 minutes, because then it'll be at an hour and a half, which is already longer than I thought I'd do. I'm not sure if I see any. Jack, did Great Britain or Ireland have the same episode of the AIDS crisis? I should know more about that, to be honest. I think you lost 2 of your uncles. That's awful. Were they gay? Britain definitely did. There are movies and TV shows about that. There was one called It's a Sin, which got made a couple of years back with Ollie Alexander. I thought he was terrible, but some of it was good. So yes, I don't know about Ireland. I think Ireland might have suffered from it less because they were so much more conservative, and being gay was very illegal, and being in a Catholic marriage was very important. So it might not have spread as much in Ireland, and it would have been even more taboo. So that is actually something interesting for me to look up. Sisters, meaning CIS. They are both cis, my sisters, actually. So you better get their pronouns right. Yeah, I think I've answered those. Okay, so this question's kind of long, but I'm going to read it out. So how to deal with friends turning against you. Okay, I've already addressed that. This one says, hi, Jack. I'm a 20-year-old stealth transsexual male from US. I like to consider myself rationally minded. I'm a pre-med student. I voted for Trump. My leftist parents have already disowned me prior to the election, and afterwards my only friend briefly ended our relationship. First of all, that is terrible. I'm so sorry that that's happened to you. I don't think anyone deserves that. I think your parents should always support you unless you do something horrific. And I don't know whether that's because you voted for Trump or because you are trans, but in either of those scenarios, I don't think that's right. I think some parents might disagree with their child transitioning, but I think it's really important to try and maintain the relationship. So you also say, I believe that I made the right decision. It is my understanding that transsexuality is caused by a neurological condition, if brain imaging can be relied upon. But in recent years, I have witnessed hordes of individuals cosplaying my disorder. And what's worse is that their mockery of my clinical disorder is costing people like me resources and respect. I hope that Trump administration will force some rationality into the situation and save countless lives, but I would like to know, do you support the total and complete ban of all transsexual healthcare? So let me just address the point first in that I understand the neurological thing in the brain is compelling, but there's no scientific basis to it from everything I've read. You know, a male brain is a male brain because it's in a male body. So no matter what my brain structure is, it's a male brain because it's in a body that produces sperm. So if you take, for example, if someone said, okay, an imaginary person is 6'5", are they male or female? If that person said male, they would get that answer right 99 point whatever percent of the time. However, there might be a freak case scenario of a woman who's 6'5", but now does that mean she's male? No. And it's the same for brain structure. So on average, female brains have certain structures and male brains have certain structures. But just like every trait, some people are on the extreme end. Some men happen to be really, really short and shorter than women. And some men will have much more brain structures which are a bit more similar to the female average. That does not make them women. It just means that they have a characteristic which is typically on average found in the other sex. So all of these things are a spectrum, right? And then the other factor is in these brain imaging studies, when they look at trans women, right, and trying to say, is their brain similar to women's? In those studies where they found, yes, there is a similarity, those trans women were all attracted to men. So all that study concluded is that on average, gay men may have more feminized brains than straight men, right? And when they look at the autogynephile brain scans, there is no difference between theirs and straight men. If you're a trans man, and that means you're female, that's obviously a different situation. But from my understanding, you know, if you're a female who is naturally just very, very masculine and it's difficult for you to move through the world, it causes you pain and discomfort, it's difficult to date, it makes you obsess over your body. I'm not saying that you shouldn't transition. Like maybe you're really happy. I mean, you are only 20. So I will say some people, you know, when I was still 27, I was still unpacking so much from my childhood that I'd never thought of before. And I think that people don't understand the gravity of that. Like 20 years old is very young to say that you've not kind of explored everything that's happened before you. But if you're happy with the decision, the whole thing about it being a neurological condition, it doesn't really matter, I think. If you're happy and you're living a great life and you're very aware of the side effects when it comes to taking testosterone as a female and what that can do to your body and the health complications you're likely to suffer as you grow up, if that is all worth it, then whether it's kind of like saying, am I born gay? It's kind of irrelevant because I know I'm gay, I know I'm attracted to men, and that's it, you know? So try not to worry too much about that, but I would just say there's no evidence for this neurological stuff. Then he said, I've witnessed hordes of individuals cosplaying my disorder. I do understand that. I think, like I said, there's no true trans, but there are people who are suffering a lot more and that it works for them a lot better. And then there are people who are just jumping on the bandwagon because they want attention. So that must be really, really annoying. It's kind of similar to like someone actually having bipolar disorder. And then there just being all these kids online saying, I have bipolar. And it's like, well, no, No, you don't. So you've also said, hope the Trump administration will force some rationality, but I'd like to know, do you support the total and complete ban? So I also hope he stops transitioning children. But I don't know if you transitioned as a child. That's the thing, because you're only 20. But I don't. So first of all, I don't support the complete ban of trans healthcare for adults. I think that will cause so much more issues than we care to admit. That's way too much backlash. It's taking away freedom. But I do think we need to reach to a point where we have better scientific evidence that this actually works for people on average, and that the medical pathway is far more rigorous, far more gatekeeping, far more therapy, and that the end result is not ideally a transition. Like, the ideal end result is you're happy in your sex, and transition is like the most extreme case scenario. So I don't want to take it from people. I just want the processes to be better so that less people will have regret and less people will have harm. But I do want it to stop for kids. And then also just working out as a society, if we're going to do this to people and change their bodies so they look like the opposite sex, then we need to have law about women's faces and kids. All of these things need to work together. I'm just seeing if there's any questions in the chat. Just lots of I'm going to kind of read through all these comments later. He also said, do you recognize the difference between gender dysphoric individuals who are born with a detectable incoherence in the gray matter of the brain and the alphabet mafia who mimic a chronic disorder for attention? So I've already debunked the brain thing, but you can disagree with me if you want. However, I think there are people who are suffering far more than others, and the other people are pretending to have gender dysphoria. And other people are actually giving themselves gender dysphoria because they're discovering what trans is online, then they're obsessing over it, then they start obsessing over their appearance and their breasts or whatever, whereas otherwise they would have just kind of carried on and maybe said, okay, puberty is a bit shit, but so they're actually kind of giving themselves a form of dysphoria, but I do think that some people suffer from it far, far worse. And I don't think that's because of gray matter in the brain, but I do understand how frustrating it must be for people like that James Rose guy to be like, oh my God, yeah, I microdosed estrogen and now my suicidality is like drastically reduced. That would really annoy me too. What kind of legislative action would you propose? I would propose ban on all child transition. I would say that there needs to be therapy from the age of like 18 to 21 before making the decision. I would say a legislative ban to protect women's spaces, and all public buildings and public institutions legally have to provide third spaces. I would say a ban on males and women's sports, prisons, and I would say that you could possibly change the gender marker on your driver's license and passport, but not your birth certificate, because your birth certificate is just fact. You can't change reality. You need to have at least some grounding in reality and not change your birth certificate, because it just makes no sense. Like, we can't change reality just because we want to be nice to a few people. But changing the marker on your passport or your driver's license, that's all right. But I do think that you should be, when you join somewhere like a gym or something, you should be obligated to tell them what your sex is too, In spaces where people are vulnerable, it should be, and I know it probably sounds really harsh what I'm saying, because I don't want people who've transitioned who are happy and just want to be left alone. I don't want their lives to get harder. But none of this situation is easy. It's all a mess, basically. So those were all the questions from my poll. I think I had one more via email. If you have any last minute questions, get them in now, because we're going to wrap up soon. Hopefully all of you have enjoyed this. I've just been absolutely running my mouth. Talking shit. One says, what's the biggest challenge you faced since creating this content? I think I've already talked on it, just kind of learning to accept the fact that some people think I'm evil, that I know in real life. People that probably always thought I've been a good, decent, kind person. I think that's really difficult. What first got you interested in politics? What was your journey like? So I've also talked about that. I mean, just coming out of the woke bubble was really disturbing. So it just made me very hungry to know more and more. I've always been a very kind of switched on, inquisitive person and have always had good intellect. And I was just really angry that I was sort of convinced to believe all these critical theory things about race and gender and, you know, whiteness and all this stuff. It made me kind of angry because I was thinking, you're better than this, Jack. You're like, you know, you shouldn't just imbibe opinions. So that was what got me interested in it. The left always bangs on about privilege. Have you ever been told you're privileged as a way to discredit what you think? And have you ever had to reflect and look deeper at a particular issue as a result? Yes, I get told that all the time. I think the easiest way to put up with that is not to give it any energy. You can decide, you can tell me that I have some, you know, impossible to actually prove on paper privilege because I'm white and male. You can tell me that I have internalized homophobia. My question is, can you provide me some scientific evidence which proves that? And they'll say, but everyone knows that white people are more privileged. And I say, no, okay? You have been taught this information at university. You spew this shit with your friends every single day. Everyone in your little bubble talks about this privilege, and it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And you guys just all think this is reality. There's lots of different ways of looking at the world and thinking about things. Thinking about white privilege and cis privilege is totally fine if that works for you and it helps you understand people's experiences and you find it useful. I am very skeptical of that because I think it leads people to very rigid thinking and being very intolerant of other worldviews because they base everything off this oppression scale. And then someone like me, a white male, comes along and says, I don't have privilege. What are you talking about? And it's like that cognitive dissonance is like, so it is really difficult. And I feel like saying that to someone is basically saying I'm racist. So it's really difficult to say that. But I'm going to continue saying it because, you know, it like I grew up, for example, I'm not a victim, but if I talk about my life, I grew up gay in socially conservative Ireland, abusive father, alcoholic father, have been living independently on my own in England since I was 18 years old. Had to work out a lot for myself, have reached full independence, have dealt with an autoimmune disorder and chronic pain. Like, you know, everyone's life is different and unique. One person might grow up experiencing racial discrimination, but they're really good at dealing with adversity and they don't give it any attention, and then they have an incredible life. One person might be Black and they grow up in a very affluent, you know, strong family who give them amazing opportunities and have never really felt systemic institutional oppression, which also can't be proven on paper, by the way. I'm all about statistics, fact, hard fact. Give me the facts, and then I can argue the point. But I just find that whole, I actually find it quite pathetic, that whole form of arguing, because you basically reduce someone's capacity to have an opinion to just their skin color, their sex, their sexuality, and whether they're cis or trans. And life is just so much more complicated than that. Like, why have we got to this point of just being so reductive, you know? Let's talk about people's experiences. What about experiential oppression? What about a white working class straight man who grew up being assaulted by his parents or his family, or, you know, lost all of his family in a car accident? If you walk up to that man, that person as a male, a young man, and say you have privilege, that is really horrible. Like, that's a really mean thing to say to someone who's had a terrible life, who's had a really tough life, and then someone who's gay, who might have a great life, says to them, oh, well, you have privilege. It's like, once you understand how stupid this way of looking at the world is, you realize, oh my gosh, like it's actually a really racist way of looking at the world, because you say, okay, these white people, they're allowed to talk about this, but they're not allowed to talk about that because they have this privilege. I'm just like, not doing it anymore. It's bullshit. People think it's just reality. It's just one way of looking at things. And that's not how I look at things. And I have friends who are Black who also feel the same way as me. So, have my reasons. I'm not racist. Get used to it. I think I have answered every question that I had. So I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat. Have you ever felt like you belong in the gay community? I have felt that. Yeah, I still do feel that a little bit. There are certain people I'm close with, and I can still go to a gay nightclub and have a good time. And I still meet some people that I really vibe with. But then when anything political comes up, it's just a bit like eye roll, because people are so biased. But yeah, I have some lesbian friends. I have lots of gay friends. Nearly all my male friends are gay except like one. So I'm lucky to still have a good gay network. And I really feel for the people I hear from that, they just don't have that, because they've either spoken about the issue or they just can't deal with being around people and not being able to speak freely. And I just feel very, very lucky to have like a partner, have gay friends who talk about this with me. And I have lots of girlfriends too. I mean, straight girlfriends. Okay, everyone. Well, I think that is a lot of questions answered. I hope you enjoyed learning a bit more about me. And I appreciate everyone being on the chat. Always open to feedback. I mean, let me know, what do you like about my channel? What would you like to see more of? I've been thinking about this a lot. It's like, do people like the podcast episodes that are an hour long, or do they prefer shorter stuff? And I'm trying to work out my strategy, because it's hard to gain this traction. But this is a 10K Q&A, and we might do another one when we get to 50 or 25 or something like that. So really appreciate it. Keep reaching out, DM me, Instagram, X, or email, whatever. And I hope you all have a wonderful Friday, a wonderful weekend. And I'm very grateful you all tuned in. So thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.